All right, we're back for the last segment of our loops overview, and by now you should feel like a loops expert. The only thing I want to cover here really is how you can use data inside of loops and also have that data persist so you can use it outside of loops. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but it's the way that the code on the back end is structured. The data and the variables and things like that that you're processing inside of the loop are not natively available for use outside of the loop, but there is a fairly simple way to make that happen. So this is going to be kind of an extension again on looping over an array of items. So we've previously done this in some of the other videos that I had, I think 2 or 3 videos before. And the difference is we're going to actually make some updates to the data or write to a new data store so that we can use this outside of the loop if you need it. All right. Quickly, the first step, just reading in that HTML color codes data store. So you see it's right here. It's the same exact one I've been using. I'm not going to show it again, but it just has those various 6 colors in it, starting with black, proceeding to white, and ending in green. After we have this, we create an empty data store. This is critical. This data store is created here so that we can read this data store later, but we're also going to write to this data store within the loop itself. So if you see this data store being created, it's created, we just give it a name, it's a placeholder and an empty value. If you didn't watch the data store videos, you can initialize a blank data store with no name. If you put a name here, every time you run this flow, the same data store will be written over. We don't really recommend that. So if you leave the name blank, a generic name will be created so that every time the flow runs, a unique data store is created for this with an empty value. Now we're going to do that same iteration over the colors. The next thing is again that basic switch where we're looking for a specific color. Again, we're going to look for that color containing white. When we find that, we're going to update that original data store. So to do that, I just go over to data, I drag in the update, I choose the data name or data ID. In this case, it's going to be that array placeholder, right? So I select array placeholder and I select data ID. Then I put the value that I want to put in there. Maybe it's something from the loop definition. You know, it needs to be in JSON format, so you need to make sure you have those brackets, but maybe it's something like that, right? This is just an example. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one because I already have one pre-populated. But if I take a look here, we have that data ID specified from the original array placeholder. And then we've populated it with some new data. Color, color, category, category, type, type, right? That's what I want. And maybe I need to be able to use this outside of the loop, but I don't want to continue doing operations and things like that in the loop because I'm done. I found what I needed and I'm going to move on. So at this point, I have the break. Now you would assume that you can immediately read this data or use this data, but you do need to provide one more function or one more thing, which is actually reading the data store again outside of the loop. So we wrote to the data store inside of the loop. And then the last step in order to be able to use that data again is to read from that data store. So I have a read here and the data ID that I'm specifying is going to be the data store that I created within the loop, right? So that's what I need to be able to, or I need to read from. Once I do that, I can now perform transforms, I can email information out of that data store, I can make other decisions, etc., with the data that I've now read after the loop. So if I run this, it's going to run. What we expect is basically to write these values to the data store, the specific values that we've captured. We read them, and then we're just going to output them as a string. We're just going to do a JSON decode. So if I take a look at this, you can see I initialize this blank empty data store. First, I read in my larger data store with all my colors. I match that one decision on the white containing white. I identify that and I update a data store with some new values. Category equals value, color equals white, type is blank. That exits the loop because I've now hit this break. I'm going to read that data store in, and you'll see it reads back in that category is value, color is white, type is blank. And this is going to perform that JSON decode and give me a string back from that data store. If you do not do it this way, any actions and things like that that you perform, once you hit the break, you cannot reference them, or you can't reference those variables. So a quick and easy way to be able to reference information that you identify or find during a loop is basically create an empty data store, update the data store within the loop, and then read the data store afterwards. That's a quick way to kind of give you that ability to interact with data and make changes or updates. So I hope that was useful. This is the last section of our series around loops. So we covered, the ability to create loops, the two types of loops, whether that's array of items or number of iterations, the two types of escapes, break and continue, and then working with data inside of the loop. So I hope you found that useful. If there are questions, comments, please send them my way.